Welcome back, AP Environmental Science. Here we go, human health and environmental risk. Over the course of this semester, I've been trying to talk to you about the importance of becoming a citizen scientist and what that means. One of the most famous examples is the neighborhood of Old Diamond, which is in Norco, Louisiana. It was composed of four city blocks that were located between a chemical plant and an oil refinery. Both of them were owned by the Shell Company. There was about 1,500 residents in this neighborhood, and they were largely lower income African American families. In 1973, a pipeline explosion blew a house off its foundation and killed two residents. And then in 1988, an accident in the refinery killed seven workers and sent more than 7 million kilograms, that's 159 million pounds, of potentially toxic chemicals directly into the air. And nearly one-third of all the children in Old Diamond suffered from asthma, and there were many cases of cancer, and the birth defect rate was high. And this unusual high rate of disease raised a lot of suspicions that two nearby industrial facilities were harming the residents. Well, by 1989, these local residents and a middle school teacher, her name was Marjorie Richards, had seen enough. Richard organized this Concerned Citizens of Norco group, and the primary goal of this group was to get Shell to buy the residents' properties at a fair price so they could move away from all of this industry and because it was putting their health at risk. So Richard contacted environmental scientists and quickly learned that to make a solid case to that company and to the U.S. EPA, she needed to be more than just an organizer. She also needed to become a scientist herself. So the residents knew that the local air had a foul smell, and they had no way of knowing, which chemicals were even present and what the concentrations were. So to determine whether they were being exposed to chemicals at concentrations that posed a health risk, their air had to be tested. So Marjorie Richard learned about specialty built buckets that they collected these air samples. And I'm not exactly sure where she learned that from, but through her research and some organization in her group, that was the conclusion that they came to. So they called themselves the Bucket Brigade, and it was a group of volunteers, and they basically slowly collected the data that she and her collaborators needed. As a result of these efforts, scientists were able to document that the Shell refinery was releasing more than 0.9 million kilograms, that's about 2 million pounds, of toxic chemicals into the air every year. And the fight against Shell meant that strong resistance from that company and officials would go on, and it went on for more than 13 years. But in the end, Richard won her battle. And in 2002, Shell agreed to purchase the homes of all the Old Diamond community neighborhood. So the company also agreed to pay an additional $5 million to the community development, and it also committed to reducing its air emissions from the refinery and by 30% to basically help improve the air quality of those residents who wanted to remain in that area. In 2007, Shell agreed that it had violated air pollution regulations in several of its Louisiana plants, and it was ordered to pay by the state $6.5 million in penalties. Well, for her tremendous efforts in winning this battle at Norco, Margie Richards was the 2004 North American recipient of the Goldman Environmental Prize, which basically honors grassroots environmentalists. And since then, Richard has brought her message to many other minority communities that are located in large pollution industries. And she teaches that protecting human health and the local environment requires community action and learning how to be a citizen scientist. There was a large explosion in that refinery, and I remember when it happened, I was a child, and we heard across in the news across the U.S. The number of health risks that we face in our lives can be overwhelming, and it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes it seems that we hear new warnings about new things every day. This causes cancer, that causes cancer. So how do we evaluate and manage all of these risks? The first step to understanding human health is to consider the three major categories of risk that can be detrimental to human health, and those are physical, biological, and chemical. Physical risks include environmental factors like natural disasters that can cause like injury and loss of life, basically. Physical risks also include like the less dramatic factors, like excessive exposure to ultraviolet radiation, from the sun, which can cause a sunburn and then eventually skin cancer, and exposure to radioactive substances like radon, which we've discussed all that before. Biological risks, which cause the most human health or human deaths, are those risks associated with disease. And chemical risks are associated with the exposure to chemicals ranging from those that actually occur naturally, like even arsenic, to all of those that are manufactured, like synthetic stuff and pesticides. So in this unit, we're going to focus on the biological and chemical risks, and we're going to determine which of those risks are common and the current state of understanding or at least how we know about them. And we're also going to look at how to assess and manage these risks. As we will see, although many health risks exist in both developed and developing worlds, nations, we can do a great deal to manage these risks and improve our overall health in our lives.